The Journey was a single-player, story-driven mode which was first released in FIFA 17, and we took on the journey of Alex Hunter. He was a young footballer. We saw him first starting with kicking a penalty, and then we did see him growing up, and we were essentially taking control of this. Now, it did start in FIFA 17, and it did continue for 3 years in total, so in FIFA 18 and FIFA 19, and that was the conclusion of essentially the 3 chapters. And this mode was removed, never to be seen again, and in this video we are going to be looking at why it was stopped. So when it was first released in FIFA 17, it was literally a breath of fresh air. This was something that people weren't really expecting, so obviously anything new that is a bonus on top of a FIFA game is going to get everyone excited. And it did offer a more personal and immersive look into the life of a rising football star. Many people dream of becoming a footballer, so of course if you give them a chance to play this in a game as a story mode, that is definitely going to be something that interests them. So then why did it stop? Before we do get into that, let's look at what people did enjoy about the journey. It was a real engaging storyline. It did allow us a chance to experience the life of a rising football star. I do think the visual cutscenes were quite nice. We had views from the football tunnel, also the dressing room. I personally quite enjoyed seeing how Alex Hunter was on private jets, expensive apartments, other things like that. That is way more than we usually get in the player career mode. So I really appreciated that. That was definitely a plus side of the journey mode. Another thing which was quite nice, or at least EA Sports tried to implement it, was key decisions. This was essentially, it would affect character development. So you could make these decisions and it would, or it was supposed to have big impacts in the story. We did see a few scenarios here. There was a couple cases of where I believe you had to choose fame or family. That was quite interesting. However, it didn't really lead to anything. So even though it made you feel like you were making decisions, did it really impact the story? You can start seeing where the problems with the journey actually started creeping in. But I do think it was quite nice. I think people did feel that there was a connection with the characters, with Alex Hunter and some of the other characters. You felt like you could relate maybe to the story, even though some people could argue it could have been done much better. Following that, there were some off the pitch decisions which were quite cool. We did have access with interviews, which again, that's something we never have seen in player career mode. If we have interviews, that would have been really cool. So this was the first time we did see it in FIFA 17, the journey. And essentially there were 3 different options. One of them was sort of more neutral, and then you had fiery, and then you had the cool response. And you pretty much could decide what you wanted to do, and this would affect your manager's opinion and also your follow count. There was some sort of built-in social media, I believe it was Twitter, and it was quite cool when there was a loading scene. You could see all of the different things. You could see some tweets, what people are saying about you, if they're tagging you, and sort of their opinions on how you're going through the season. And then also you could see if your follower count is increasing. And that was quite a cool thing, I do feel like, because obviously in real life, footballer does have social media, and that's growing a more and more important role in a footballer's career. So all of these things were good things. They were the pros for the journey, but there were quite a few gaps in this, and it was all sort of fundamentally, you could say, pointless, because it all led to the same thing. Everyone was essentially prodded along the same journey, and it was just the same storyline for everyone. Now, that could be a decent thing if it's a really good story, but I think people didn't really feel like the journey actually was that. So no matter essentially what club you chose, you had all of the different Premier League clubs. Whichever one you chose, the same players would have ended up being signed, like Harry Kane. You'd still been thrown off to a smaller club on loan, and essentially there wasn't really much unique storylines. Everyone just had the same exact experience. I think it would have been better if you had less options and actually each one of these were a different pathway. Let's say you had one Premier League club, that could be pretty cool, and then there was another country, let's say in Spain maybe for La Liga, or in Italy for Serie A. If there were less options and these pathways went much deeper, that would have been very interesting. And then there would have also been an aspect of replayability as well with the journey. Tying in with this, the responses you actually gave didn't impact the story. if you chose the fiery responses every single time, which was sort of more aggressive, there was a point where you could choose to apologize, or you could actually reject the apology. That if you chose that and you did that every single time, and you were maybe rude in the press conferences, whatever, you chose those fiery responses, it didn't actually impact the story at all. It only impacted the manager's opinion and also your follow account, but those aren't really any significant things, and you still end up continuing the story as usual, and it had no impact at all. So I think the real flaw in the journey was that EA Sports made you feel like you were in control, and EA knew that they have to give the person playing different options and different pathways, but they didn't actually execute on that properly, because they tried to make you feel like you're in control, but you actually weren't, and it all led you down the same pathway. I do believe that EA were aware of this, and maybe some people developing this were trying to avoid this. There was some decent personalization and customization aspects, but it wasn't really too significant. You could only change the hairstyle and add some tattoos. It would have been way more interesting if you had a whole currency and you could have been doing more things, maybe purchasing your own house, choosing your own apartments, and maybe choosing your own cars, other things like that. And that really wasn't in that story. So I feel like you couldn't really make it your own story. You were just following and watching Alex Hunter go on his journey. Following from that, as I did already sort of touch on, other story modes do have an incentive to replay the second time round and maybe do things differently, try and do things in a more riskier approach. But with the journey, that simply wasn't on offer. There was no point at all to go ahead and replay the journey. Once the story was completed, just no reason to replay it, because the outcome always was going to remain the same. Despite having said all of these things, I do still think the pros did outweigh the cons in the first game. I think FIFA 17, even FIFA 18, if the journey sort of stopped there, it would have been good. And I think some people do agree with that, but it was a little bit strange. It felt completely unnatural. In FIFA 19, you were essentially forced to play with other characters. There was this guy called Williams, and there was also a woman who was called Kim, and you were essentially forced to play with these two characters. And I think a lot of people maybe didn't want to play with them. I think it would have been better if they stuck with Alex Hunter. And I feel like FIFA 19, EA Sports were just lost for ideas, and they just decided to go down this path. And I think it would have been better if EA stopped at FIFA 17 or maybe even FIFA 18, and then they could have restarted with a different character and continued the journey. Now, the market is huge for those that are interested in the experience and the story of what it's like to become a footballer. That is why I think the journey did gain a lot of traction, and there was a lot of support for it when we saw the announcement and the trailers for FIFA 17. I do think if EA were to introduce a sort of story mode into EA Sports FC 24, it could actually be a great way to take people's mind off the fact that they have lost the FIFA naming rights. So would you like to see a story mode similar to the journey returning maybe this September with EA Sports FC 24? Comment down below your thoughts.